My name is Camille Wexler. I'm 35 years old. And this is the story of how my own family tried to erase me, until I uncovered the truth and rewrote the ending myself. I still remember the silence. Not the kind that comes when a party ends, or when a storm passes, but the silence that follows loss. The kind that echoes even when the world around you refuses to stop spinning. That silence haunted me the morning I stared at the tiny white crib in the center of my bedroom. Imported from Italy, lacquered ivory wood, curved sides. It looked like something from a fairy tale. Only this fairy tale had no ending. 6 months ago, the heartbeat I'd clung to vanished. One moment it fluttered inside me like a secret song. The next it was gone. Just gone. I spent 3 weeks in bed after the miscarriage. No one from my family visited. Not even once. I'd barely returned from the hospital when the phone rang. My mother. Her voice casual. Distant. Have you cleared the nursery yet? Don't let the gloom linger too long. It's not good for the energy in the house. That was her way of acknowledging the death of my child. I remember gripping the phone tighter, too shocked to even cry. Yes, I know, I said. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't ask what I needed. She only warned me not to appear too upset. Especially around my younger sister Madison. She's expecting, Mom said, as if that erased my grief. You wouldn't want to upset her. These things are contagious. Contagious. As if heartbreak was some kind of airborne illness. Madison had always been the sunbeam of the Wexler household. Golden child. Soft voice. Big eyes. The daughter who could do no wrong. She got into a local community college and they threw her a backyard party. When I earned a full scholarship to Columbia's architecture program in New York, they asked why I wanted to move so far from home. You'll make your life harder, my father had said. Still, I thought things might change when I got pregnant. Maybe, just maybe, they'd see me. Not as the career-driven daughter who didn't settle down, but as a mother. As someone capable of creating life, nurturing love. But even that dream was stolen. The only person who stayed with me through it all was my husband, Marcus. He never left my side. He spoon-fed me porridge when I wouldn't eat. He sat beside me while I stared at the nursery wall, whispering comfort when words failed. His aunt, Evelyn, called every night. She never asked, "Are you okay?" Instead, she told me, "If you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream, scream. Don't force a smile for anyone who wouldn't bleed for you." Clung to that. Because my family wouldn't bleed for me. They wouldn't even acknowledge I was hurting. Weeks passed. Then, just as I began to breathe again, a letter arrived. It was an invitation. Cream-colored cardstock, embossed in pink foil. Party. Madison's pregnancy celebration. The kind of occasion I once dreamt of having for myself. Attached to the card was a handwritten note from my mother. "Camille, are you free Saturday night? You're her sister after all. Help out with the decorations, will you? You've always had good taste." Not a word about what I'd lost. Not a hint of compassion. Just a request. No, a demand. "You owe the family." Marcus found me that evening, the card crumpled in my fist. He gently took it from me. "You don't have to go," he said. "You've given enough." But I knew the truth. If I didn't show up, I'd be the selfish one. The bitter sister. The one who couldn't be happy for others. The one who made everything about herself. I still remember his eyes. How heavy they looked when I said I was going anyway. "I'm doing it for closure," I lied. That night, I sat on the patio, sketching designs for a lavender-themed baby shower. Madison's favorite flower. The same bloom I'd once imagined painting in my own nursery. I revised the design I'd created for my child, the one who would never arrive, and gave it away for someone else's joy. Saturday arrived too soon. I pulled up to my parents' home, arms full of decorations. The same house where I'd once announced my pregnancy, only to be met with a shrug. Madison was already there, glowing beneath the warm afternoon sun. Her bump barely visible beneath a cream silk dress. My mother hovered over her, fluttering like a doting angel. Dad brought out a cake topped with an ultrasound image. "Does the baby look like me, sis?" Madison giggled as I walked in. Smiled stiff. My mother greeted me as though I were the event planner, not her daughter. "Camille's here," she called. "Did you bring the decorations? I've already set the tables in the garden." No hug. No acknowledgement. Just expectation. Marcus offered to help, but I waved him off. "I've got this," I said. The backyard buzzed with laughter and chatter. Relatives doted on Madison. Complimented her radiance. No one mentioned my baby. No one noticed the strain behind my smile. Not even Madison's husband, Jason, who always seemed a little more perceptive than the others, said anything at first. Until he approached quietly near the dessert table. "Camille," he said softly. "Are you really okay?" His voice was sincere. "Real." I gave him a small nod. "Thank you for asking." Then Madison called him over for photos, and he slipped away. As dusk fell, I stood beneath the lavender tree I had decorated hours earlier, watching the lights twinkle like distant stars. My mother passed by and smiled. "You did a lovely job, Camille. That's what sisters are for. Thoughtful. Selfless." I felt something inside me tighten. Later that night, as I packed up the decorations alone, I told myself this would be the last time. The last party. The last time I showed up for people who couldn't see past my usefulness. I didn't know then that the worst was yet to come. And that the next party, the gender reveal, would leave me in a hospital bed, barely alive. The gender reveal was scheduled for the following Sunday. Madison wanted it rustic chic, set at a rented villa just outside Mount Pleasant. A countryside place with white wooden shutters, wraparound porch, and a backyard that spilled into the edge of a pine forest. Cozy, intimate, elegant. Her exact words. And, of course, my mother had already volunteered me to design the entire setup. "You have an eye for this, Camille. Besides, it's not like you're preoccupied these days," she said on the phone, her tone saccharine, slipping in the cruelty like honey over thorns. I nearly told her no. I should have. But Marcus encouraged me to go one last time. "Do it on your terms," he said. "Go finish the chapter. And then close the book." So I did. I arrived early that day before anyone else. The air was fresh, the kind that hums with quiet unease before a storm. I walked the property alone, absorbing the stillness, then set to work stringing pastel balloons across the porch, arranging the gender reveal table under a row of lanterns, fluffing hydrangea bouquets. Everything looked perfect. Fake but perfect. At 3 o'clock, the guests began arriving. Family friends, Madison's college friends, Dad's law firm colleagues. I floated among them, polite, smiling. A ghost in her own story. Marcus stood in the corner beside Aunt Evelyn, both of them watching with guarded eyes. Aunt Evelyn caught my gaze once, offered a tight nod of solidarity. I nodded back. She was the only one from either side of the family who ever truly showed up for me. Madison appeared at last in a white lace maternity dress, one hand resting on her bump, the other wrapped around Jason's arm. She took the microphone with an air of performance that made my skin crawl. "Thank you all for coming," she chirped. "Today is such a special day. Not just because we get to find out if we're having a baby boy or girl, but because it's a celebration of the people who support us." People clap. She continued, voice sweet as sugar. "And I want to give a very special thank you to my sister, Camille, for designing this entire party. Isn't she amazing?" A few more scattered claps. I smiled, nodded politely, swallowed the burn rising in my throat. Then she said it. "And you know why Camille had so much time to help me?" A pause. Everyone leaned in. "It's because she's not busy with a baby anymore." The words sliced through the air like glass. "She had a miscarriage," Madison added with a laugh. "So I guess today is kind of a celebration for her too, getting back into work and all." The silence that followed felt like a black hole. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Marcus stood up so fast his chair clattered. Aunt Evelyn gasped. Jason looked like he'd been slapped. I walked to the center of the yard, my heart pounding, the blood roaring in my ears. "What did you just say?" asked. Madison blinked innocently. "Oh my gosh. Don't be so sensitive. It was a joke." "A joke." My voice shook, but I didn't back down. "You used someone's loss, your sister's loss, as a punchline?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some guests glanced at the ground. Others walked away. Before Madison could reply, my mother grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. "Camille," she hissed, dragging me away from the group. "You're making a scene." "I'm standing up for myself." "You always do this," she snapped. "Always turning things into tragedy. Can't you just let your sister have her moment?" I tried to pull away, but she yanked harder, hauling me up the stairs and onto the second-floor balcony. The breeze whipped through my hair. My legs were trembling. "If you don't want to shame this family," she said through clenched teeth, "you'll shut up and go back down there." "I lost a child," I whispered. "And you never even held me. Never asked if I was okay." She glared. "You always play the victim. That's why no one loves you." Those words shattered something inside me. I stepped back. And that's when she shoved me. Hard. My back slammed into the wooden railing. The world tilted. And then I was falling. I remember the sky. Just before the impact, the endless blue sky. And then nothing. Just wind and silence. I woke up to white walls. Machines beeping. A smell of antiseptic so sharp it made my stomach churn. I blinked slowly, unsure if I was dead. Marcus was there. He grabbed my hand like it was the only thing tethering him to reality. "You're alive," he whispered, eyes bloodshot. "You're okay." I wasn't okay. Not yet. My ribs were fractured. My spine was bruised. I had a mild concussion and a cast around my left arm. But I was breathing. And that meant I had one more chance. Later that evening, Marcus sat beside me in the hospital room. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low. "What is it?" "Jason's here. And he's already spoken to the police." My chest tightened. Jason stepped in quietly, eyes hollow, hands shaking. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world collapse. "Camille," he said, "I need to tell you something. I should have told you long ago." I stayed silent. He took a breath. "It wasn't an accident." My heart stopped. "I overheard Madison and your mother months ago. They were always offering you tea when you visited. Always pushing certain drinks. I started getting suspicious." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small bag. "I took a few of those tea packets. Had them tested at the clinic where I work. My blood ran cold. They contained alkaloids, substances that interfere with fetal development." He wasn't finished. "I also found text messages. Ones Madison sent to your mom. Things like, 3 more days and she's done. Don't worry, she's too weak." I couldn't speak. Marcus's grip tightened on my hand. I looked from him to Jason and then to the ceiling, tears falling silently into my hairline. "They killed my baby," I whispered. Jason nodded. "And I stayed silent too long. But I'm not silent anymore." I didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to breathe. But I knew one thing. This wasn't just a miscarriage. It was murder. And now I had proof. The days that followed were a blur of 4 drips, whispered updates, and the slow, painful ache of betrayal settling deeper into my bones. Every breath felt like dragging broken glass through my lungs. I couldn't roll onto my side without wincing. But none of that compared to the burn in my chest when I replayed Jason's words. They killed my baby. On purpose. Not by neglect. Not by chance. By design. Jason had turned over everything. The test results from the tainted tea. The text messages from Madison's phone. The prescription slip written under a fake name. He'd even managed to pull up security footage from their old house. Of my mother in the kitchen, carefully switching tea canisters before I arrived. Marcus stayed by my side through it all. He fed me broth, helped me to the bathroom, held me when I cried like a child. Aunt Evelyn visited daily. She didn't say much, but her presence was solid, like a lighthouse in a storm I could no longer pretend wasn't real. On the third day, a woman in a gray blazer stepped into my hospital room. She had short curls, eyes like slate, and a calm that seemed to settle the air. "Camille," she said, offering a hand. "I'm Clarissa Monroe. I've been retained by Marcus and Evelyn to represent you." And blinked. "Represent me?" "For the criminal case," she said gently. "And the civil one. What happened to you was not just cruel, it was illegal. You were assaulted. You were poisoned. And it's time we fight back." I nodded slowly. I couldn't speak. Not yet. But I wanted justice. Needed it. Clarissa visited again 2 days later with a thick file in her arms. Her lips were tight as she set it on the side table beside my bed. "There's something you need to see," she said. "It's about more than just what Madison and your mother did to you. It's about why." She sat, flipping through the pages. "The police took preliminary statements from your mother, from Madison, and a few extended family members. What they found aligns with Jason's testimony." My stomach turned. "Your grandfather, Thomas Wellington, died 5 years ago," she continued. "But before he passed, he created an addendum to his will. It was to be opened only upon the birth of his first great-grandchild. Whoever bore that child would unlock a trust, one worth nearly $1 million. Froze. Clarissa's voice softened. "The will specified that the first great-grandchild must carry the Wellington surname, and must be raised by a parent who also carried that name." My mind reeled. "I never changed my last name after marrying Marcus," I said slowly. "But Madison did, she became Foster." "Exactly," Clarissa said. "Which meant neither of you technically qualified. But your mother believed she could bend that." I stared blankly. "So, they wanted to make sure Madison's baby would be first." "They wanted to ensure you wouldn't be first," Clarissa corrected. I couldn't move. My hands trembled under the blanket. "They thought your pregnancy would jeopardize the inheritance. So they made a choice." I wanted to vomit. My child was an obstacle to them? Clarissa gave a sorrowful nod. "And they acted accordingly." She pulled out more documents. "These are messages between Madison and your mother. I won't make you read them unless you're ready." "I need to know," I said, my voice flat. "All of it." She slid the paper toward me. "What does Camille have? Her name's not even in the will." "Don't worry." I switched the tea. 3 more days and it's done. Then she'll be left with nothing but an empty belly and pity. Covered my mouth. The tears came like a flood. Not the quiet kind I'd learned to hide. Not the composed sort that slipped out when no one was looking. These were sobs that cracked my chest wide open. They did this. And they didn't even feel guilt. Clarissa gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "We're filing charges for attempted reproductive sabotage, intentional harm and assault. We're also suing for damages, including emotional distress and attempted inheritance fraud." "And Jason?" I asked, swallowing hard. "He's filed for divorce," she said. "And he's petitioning for full custody of the baby once it's born." I nodded, but the truth stung. This wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation. Everything I once believed about my family, every fragile hope I'd ever held, was dead now. The only thing left was justice. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital and placed in a private convalescence home under the care of a trauma specialist. I spent mornings relearning how to walk without flinching, afternoons in therapy, and nights staring out the window wondering how long it would take to feel like a person again. But something strange happened in the quiet. I began to feel stronger. Not healed, not whole, but focused, determined. Jason visited once during that period. He arrived with a file in his hand and 1,000 apologies in his eyes. "I know I can't undo any of it," he said. "But I'm doing everything I can to make it right. I've told the police everything. I even gave them access to our home surveillance archives. I never suspected. I should have. You were lied to just like me, I said quietly. I should have protected you, he whispered. You're protecting the baby now, I said. That's what matters. Before leaving, he hesitated at the door. If the baby wants to know someday what happened, who stood up for him, who fought, I'll tell him about you. That made something crack in me again. Not pain. Not grief. Something gentler. Maybe hope. The trial began that winter in Charleston County Court. I walked into that courtroom supported by Marcus on one side and Clarissa on the other. Aunt Evelyn sat behind us. So did two of my colleagues from the architectural firm. People who saw me not as broken but as brave. My mother, father, and Madison sat across from me at the defense table. The same people who had raised me. The same people who had tried to destroy me. The evidence was irrefutable. Text messages. Prescription records. Surveillance footage. Jason's sworn testimony. Even a recorded phone call my mother had made to a pharmacy under a false name. They didn't even flinch. Madison sobbed when the prosecutor read aloud her messages. 3 more days and she's done. But my mother, Candace Wexler, she stood tall, defiant. We did it for the family, she said. For tradition. Camille never belonged to that legacy. She's always been the outsider. My father said little. I was just doing what my wife wanted, he muttered. When I took the stand, the room held its breath. Told everything. From the day I found out I was pregnant to the moment I woke up in the hospital. I spoke not as a victim, but as a woman who had survived what should have broken her. I don't need pity, I said. I need justice. And my child deserves to be remembered. Even if you never gave him a name. 3 weeks later the verdict came in. Madison. 4 years in prison for conspiracy to cause harm and interference with reproductive health. My mother and father. 5 years each for conspiracy, medical fraud, and familial abuse. The Wellington Trust was frozen by the state due to inheritance manipulation and pending civil litigation. Madison gave birth in prison, a healthy baby boy. Jason named him Elijah. And with quiet resolve, he applied for full custody. He refused to let the child grow up under the shadow of his mother's crimes. And as for me, I watched it all from the quiet sanctuary of my home. I had won. But it didn't feel like victory. Felt like truth. And that truth was finally mine. Spring arrived slowly, as if even nature knew I needed more time. I had moved out of Charleston and into a quiet coastal town called Beaufort, about 2 hours away. Marcus and I found a small white cottage by the sea, with creaky floorboards and lavender blooming wildly along the garden fence. It wasn't much, not compared to the historic estates I once restored, but it was ours. Clean, quiet, healing. The court battles were over, but the war inside me had not ended. Some mornings I'd wake from sleep gasping, unsure whether I was falling again, or reliving the moment I lost my baby. The balcony. My mother's hand. The wind. The snap of bone. The absence of love. It all came rushing back like a wave that didn't care how many times it had already hit the shore. But I was breathing. Had survived. And every sunrise brought with it the reminder. They didn't win. The Wellington name was officially scrubbed from the inheritance records. The trust dissolved into probate hell, contested by long-lost cousins and probate lawyers who would probably devour it whole. Let them. Madison had given birth in prison to a boy named Elijah. A boy who had nothing to do with the crimes of his mother, but would bear her shadow if something wasn't done. Jason filed for and was granted full custody, and he made one change I'll never forget. He changed the boy's last name to Foster. No longer a Wellington. No longer an heir to blood money. I know it doesn't undo anything, Jason told me one afternoon, standing on my new porch while Marcus pruned the rose bush nearby. But at least he'll grow up with kindness. With truth. I nodded, touched in a way I hadn't expected. Does he know about what happened? About me? He will, Jason said. But not yet. When he's older, I'll tell him there was once a woman who stood up for what was right. Who chose to speak, even when it cost her everything. He paused, then added, "I'll tell him you're the reason he exists at all." That night, I sat by the ocean sketching again for the first time in months. Nothing elaborate, just pencil on paper. House. Open windows. Light pouring out. Place where no secrets could live. That was the dream now. Not fame. Not magazine spreads. Just peace. And then, one rainy afternoon in early fall, Aunt Evelyn showed up with a guest. Little girl. She was maybe 10 years old, thin as a reed, her gray-blue eyes too quiet for her age. "This is Lily," Evelyn said gently. "Her mother was a friend of mine. She passed in a car accident 3 months ago. Her father's missing. She's been in the system since. I thought maybe." "Well, she asked to meet you." "Me?" I asked, surprised. Lily nodded, her gaze flickering to the sketchbook on the coffee table. "I like drawing houses," she whispered. "Ones with really big windows. So when I'm sad, I can still see the sky." That line pierced through every layer of scar tissue I'd built. I handed her my sketchbook without thinking. "Then let's draw." And we did. Side by side without saying much. But in that silence bloomed something unexpected. Connection. 4 hours, the house echoed with the scratch of pencils and the soft rhythm of breathing. And for the first time since my fall, I didn't feel like a woman recovering. I felt like someone beginning again. That night, Marcus and I cleared dishes from the table in quiet companionship. Then he turned to me, dish towel in hand, eyes hesitant but hopeful. "What would you think," he asked, "if we tried to adopt Lily?" Stop. Not from fear. Not even from surprise. But because something inside me warmed in the softest way. "Are you sure?" I asked, trembling. "Are you?" he returned. I didn't answer with words. I didn't have to. I walked upstairs, found Lily curled in the guest room with the sketchbook across her lap, and sat beside her. "Would you like to stay here with us? A little longer?" I asked. She didn't smile. Not quite. But her eyes lit up just enough. "I don't have to go back to the shelter." "No," I said softly. "Not if you don't want to." She nodded. And that night as I tucked her in, she whispered, "Do you think Mama Camille would like my picture?" Took everything in me not to cry. 3 months later, with Clarissa's help, we filed the paperwork for temporary guardianship. Lily became a legal part of our lives under the state's protective care system. We didn't promise to be perfect parents. Only to be the kind who never let love become conditional. One morning, I found Lily drawing a picture at the breakfast table. 3 figures stood under a tree. A tall man, a long-haired woman, and a little girl holding a yellow umbrella. "Who are they?" I asked. "My new family," she said simply. She looked up at me. "Can I really call you Mama now?" I wrapped my arms around her and whispered, "Always." In that moment, the part of my heart that died the day I lost my baby sparked back to life. Not as a replacement, not as compensation, but as rebirth. Real family, I realized, isn't blood. It's the hand that reaches out when you're at your lowest and says, "I see you. I choose you." And I would choose Lily every time. The official adoption hearing took place in early spring, under a sky so blue it felt like a blessing. Lily wore a yellow dress she picked out herself, saying it matched the umbrella in her drawing. She held both my hand and Marcus's as we stepped into the family court building in Beaufort. Her grip was strong, steady, nothing like the quiet girl who once sketched windows to escape her sadness. The judge, an older woman with silver curls and warm eyes, asked Lily if she understood what the adoption meant. Lily nodded. "It means I don't have to be scared anymore." I pressed a hand over my heart. The gavel fell with a soft thud. And just like that, Lily Wexler became our daughter. We didn't celebrate with some grand reception or rented venue. No pink balloons or performative speeches. Just a small dinner in our garden. Marcus grilled chicken. I baked a lopsided chocolate cake. We lit 3 paper lanterns and watched them drift into the dusk. And for the first time in my life I felt full. Not full of vengeance, or grief, or longing, just full of something rare. That night, as I was loading dishes into the sink, Lily wrapped her arms around me from behind. "Mama Camille," she whispered. "Is real family when you don't have to pretend anymore?" I turned, knelt down, and looked into her wide gray-blue eyes. "Exactly. Real family is where you're allowed to just be." She smiled then, really smiled, and I knew we'd both found our place. Still, the shadows of the past didn't vanish overnight. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night from dreams of falling, my mother's hand at my back, the railing giving way, the sky rushing to meet me. Other times it was the crib. The white Italian crib I never got to use. Still sometimes it crept into my sketchbook. Broken line. Crack in the window. A missing figure. But I didn't hide those sketches anymore. Kept them. Tucked between Lily's drawings of umbrellas and trees and big windows. Because healing wasn't forgetting. It was remembering without being devoured. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer in the hallway, I found something I hadn't seen in almost a year. The original nursery design. The one I drew when I found out I was pregnant. Sunflowers. Light blue walls. An old rocking chair beside a window. I sat on the floor, holding it in my hands, unsure what to feel. Then Lily came in, plopped down beside me, and looked over my shoulder. "That's really pretty." He nodded. "It was for someone special." She tilted her head. "Is it okay if we make a room like that?" "But for me." I blinked, startled. "You want this?" "Not exactly," she said. "Maybe with purple instead of blue. And bookshelves. And a window seat where I can draw. But the feeling of it, I like that." My throat tightened. "Then we'll build it." Together, we designed the room over the next few weeks. Every color, every pattern, every tiny lamp and painted beam, we chose as a team. Marcus helped with the shelves. I painted the mural. Lily picked out star-shaped lights for the ceiling and tiny velvet curtains. And the day we moved her things in, she turned to me and whispered, "I think he would have liked this room too. The baby." That stopped me cold. "I think so too," I said, hugging her tightly. "More than you know." Life continued, not without pain but with something better, balance. Jason visited once more that summer. Elijah, his son, toddled beside him, clinging to his pant leg. He had Madison's eyes but Jason's calm presence. "Quiet boy. Until." Jason and I talked briefly on the porch while Marcus and Lily blew bubbles with Elijah in the yard. "I know this isn't what any of us imagined," he said. "But thank you. For everything." "I didn't do it for thanks," I said. "I did it because no child deserves to be born into lies." He nodded. "When Elijah is old enough, I'll tell him the truth. Not just about Madison. About you. I'll tell him how you stood up for him before he even took his first breath." I watched the little boy chase a floating bubble with wide, curious eyes. And for the first time I felt no bitterness. Only forgiveness. Not for Madison or my parents but for myself. For the years I spent begging people to love me when I was already enough. That fall, I received a letter from the state confirming the Wellingtons' estate would be auctioned to pay damages. A small portion, less than 20%, would be awarded to me through a civil settlement. Clarissa called to say she knew I'd probably want to donate it. I told her I had something else in mind. A grant. For young women in architecture. Specifically those who'd experienced loss, abandonment, or family trauma. I called it the First Light Foundation. Because sometimes the light doesn't come at the beginning. Sometimes it comes after the darkness has tried everything to snuff it out. Lily helped me design the logo. House. A wide window. And inside it, a tiny flickering flame. "That's us," she said proudly. "Yes," I whispered. "It really is." Fall in Beaufort was slow to settle, but when it did, it dressed the town in gold and copper. The wind was cooler now, the days shorter. Lily had started school at the little charter down the road, where she made fast friends and quickly became known as the girl who draws whole houses during recess. Sometimes I'd walk by her room and see her sketching at the window seat we'd built together, legs tucked under her, face tilted toward the sunlight, a quiet hum in her throat. The same melody every time. I never asked what it was. I didn't have to. Some things didn't need explanations. One crisp Saturday morning, Lily brought home a flyer. Career Day. It read in bold purple letters. She had circled the date. "Can you come?" she asked, her eyes wide. Smiled. "You want me to talk about my job? You don't just make houses pretty," she said. "You make places where people feel safe. I think that's cool." And so, 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a classroom full of curious fourth graders with rolled blueprints in one hand and a foam core model in the other. Lily sat in the front row, beaming. "This," I said, pointing to the miniature of a sunlit cottage with big windows and climbing ivy on the sides, "is what I call a soul-safe house. Space that welcomes you. A space that listens." A boy raised his hand. "Do houses really listen?" "In a way," I answered. "A real home pays attention. It remembers where the light lands in the morning and where your shadow rests at night. That's how I design now, with memory in mind." After the bell rang, a teacher pulled me aside and whispered, "Lily talks about you like you built her entire world." I didn't know how to respond. I just smiled, holding back the sting in my eyes. Because the truth was, she built mine too. But not every day was so sweet. There were still bad nights. The kind that crept in with the cold. One evening, while tucking Lily into bed, I heard her whisper, "Do you think my mom would have wanted me?" The question sliced through the quiet like a knife. I sat on the edge of her bed. "I don't know what her heart held, Lily. But I know what mine does. And I want you. Every day. Always." She didn't answer right away. "Then? Even when I mess up?" "Especially then." She nodded and rolled over, burying her face in her pillow. That night I stood at the back porch for a long time, the sky ink black, the air heavy. Marcus joined me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "Do you think I'm doing this right?" Yes. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "There's no perfect. There's only presence. And you've shown up more than anyone ever showed up for you." I leaned into him, and together we watched the tide inch toward the sand, slow and sure. A few days later, Clarissa called again. "There's been a news," she said. My body stiffened. "What kind?" "Your mother is eligible for early parole. She's filed a request for a review." Course she had. "And Madison?" asked, my voice flat. "Still serving. But her lawyers are likely to attempt something similar next year." I exhaled slowly. "Do I have to testify again?" "Not unless they request a hearing. But I wanted you to know. Be prepared." That night, I took out the letter my mother sent during the trial, the one I never opened. I'd kept it buried in a drawer under tax returns and old warranties, thinking it might hold some flicker of remorse. Opened it now. Just one sentence. "You've always been dramatic." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just more denial. I didn't cry. I burned the letter in the fireplace, watched the flames consume the page, and let the ash fall into nothing. Because that's what she was now, nothing. 2 weeks later, Lily came home with a new drawing. This one was different. 3 figures again, but older this time. The girl had longer hair. The house behind them had 2 stories and a wraparound porch. She pointed to the woman in the drawing. "That's you. When I'm big, I want to build a house like this for us. With a garden. And a guest room." "For who?" asked. I shrugged. "Maybe someone like me. Who needs it?" I kissed the top of her head. "Then you're going to build something truly beautiful." Thanksgiving came and went without a single word from anyone in the Wexler family. No surprise. They no longer existed to me. Instead, we invited Clarissa, Jason, and Elijah for dinner. The kids played on the lawn while we shared plates of roasted vegetables, pies, and laughter that didn't feel borrowed or fake. It was the first holiday I'd spent surrounded by people who chose me, not out of obligation but out of love. After dessert, Clarissa clinked her glass. "To Camille," she said. "And to building new roots when the old ones rot." Everyone raised their glasses. And I realized I didn't miss the people who never saw me. Because I was surrounded by the ones who finally did. Winter in Beaufort arrived with quiet grace. Dew clung to the lavender stalks outside our windows, and the sea turned a colder shade of blue. It was the kind of season that didn't demand attention. It simply settled patiently like a truth that had always been there. On a January morning thick with mist, Lily woke me early. "Mama," she whispered, breathless at my bedside. "I had a dream." And blinked. "What about?" "We lived in a house on a hill," she said, "with a big roof, and every night we climbed up and watched the stars. You said they were wishes that already came true." I smiled, brushing the hair from her forehead. "Maybe they are." And in that moment I realized. I no longer woke with dread. The dreams of falling, the echoes of betrayal, the ghost of that nursery. They still lived inside me, but they no longer ruled me. That same week, the final adoption paperwork arrived. It was official, stamped and sealed. Lily Grace Wexler Foster. Our daughter forever. We framed the certificate and hung it above the fireplace. Not to boast, but to remind ourselves that sometimes, the family you choose is more sacred than the one you were born into. Marcus and I threw a small celebration. Nothing grand. Just our people. Aunt Evelyn, Clarissa, Jason, and little Elijah. Lily decorated the backyard herself with paper lanterns and a hand-painted sign that read, "Real families are made with love, not rules." That night, we took our first official family photo beneath the oak tree. Lily stood between us, cheeks flushed, her hand gripping mine like she'd never let go. And I knew I would never let go either. Later that evening, while washing dishes, Lily came up behind me and hugged me again. She did that a lot now. These soft, silent hugs, as if to check that the world hadn't changed while she was looking away. "Mama Camille," she asked softly, "can I tell you something kinda big?" "Of course." She looked up at me with those gray-blue eyes, too deep for her age. "When I lived at the shelter, I used to think maybe I wasn't supposed to be here. That maybe God made a mistake." My hands stilled in the water. But now I think he was just waiting for the right people. I turned around and knelt so we were face to face. "He wasn't waiting, sweetheart. He was building something." "Like what?" "Place. Family. A future where your pain would become a garden." She blinked. "A garden. One where love grows slow but strong." She nodded, solemn. "Like lavender." "Exactly." That night, I sat on the porch and looked out across the lawn, at the swing Marcus had hung for Lily, the art supplies scattered on the table, and the soft light glowing from every window. I had once thought I would never know peace again. I had once been pushed by the very people who gave me life. I had lost a child I never got to hold, never got to name. But I had also survived. And from that survival, I built something that no one could ever take from me. Truth, justice, and a family that saw me fully. Madison was still in prison, her appeals denied. My parents remained estranged, bitter, aging, and irrelevant. I hadn't heard from them in over a year. And I didn't care to, because I no longer needed closure from people who never offered compassion. Their silence was finally the apology I stopped begging for. My final act of healing came one spring morning when I returned to Charleston to visit the Plantain Riverside estate, my most celebrated project. It had been featured again in Architecture Monthly, only this time with a new headline. Camille Wexler's Comeback. Building Beauty from the Ashes. I walked the halls I once restored, ran my hand over the banister I designed, and stood in the nursery I'd created on the second floor. Light poured through the windows, spilling across the pale blue walls, and I smiled, because the woman who once dreamed of filling that room with a child was still here. But she no longer needed that version of motherhood to feel complete. She had found her child in a way no one could have expected. And she had become more than a survivor. She had become whole. As I drove home that afternoon, I passed the edge of town and saw the sun breaking through clouds, soft beams lighting up the sky. A single thought came to me, simple and quiet. Not all wounds stay open. Some become windows. And through them we see the life we were always meant to live. Camille's story is a powerful reminder that blood may create relatives, but love creates family. Through betrayal, heartbreak, and nearly losing her life, she found strength not in vengeance, but in truth, healing, and the love she built from scratch. Her journey is proof that from the deepest pain can bloom the most beautiful future. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more real, raw, and unforgettable journeys of justice, redemption, and resilience.